6 months after my husband died, I asked his son to leave my house. I thought he was hiding something from me. I was wrong. The truth was far worse. Someone had forged my signature, used a dead woman's identity, accessed my husband's medical records, and entered my home while I was sleeping. Then I found a photograph taken 6 minutes before my husband died. His doctor was standing beside his bed, and the person next to her was my stepson. I thought I finally knew who had betrayed me. Then a woman named Mara called and said, "Your husband wasn't protecting Dorian that night. He was protecting me. If you were in my position, would you trust your stepson or turn him over to the police?" Tell me what you would do in the comments, and subscribe if you want to uncover the truth with me. I knew something was wrong with my husband's son when he stopped pretending he wanted to stay. 6 months after Merrick Nowak died, Dorian Vale looked at me across our kitchen table and said, "If you make me leave, Amelia, you're going to regret it." I expected anger, not a warning. My name is Amelia Nowak. I was 47, and for 17 years, I had been Marek's wife. Dorian was his son from his first marriage. He was 32, quiet, careful, and difficult to read. When Merrick died, Dorian moved into our guest room. I understood at first. Merrick had suffered a heart attack 3 weeks earlier, and Dorian had been at the hospital almost every day. After the funeral, he said he couldn't bear going back to his apartment.
So I gave him time.
1 month became 2. 2 became 4. By the 6th month, I was sharing my home with a man who seemed to be watching everything I did. He noticed which envelopes arrived when I went to the bank and who called me. That Monday morning, I finally said, "Dorian, I need you to move out."
He stopped eating.
When? Within 30 days. He stared at me. Why? Because this is my home. I know. I need my space back. You could have said that sooner. I was trying to give you time. He leaned back. You think I'm staying because I want your house? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Then he said quietly, "You really don't know what your husband left behind." What does that mean? Dorian stood and carried his plate to the sink. Ask yourself why my father kept paying for a storage unit he told you didn't exist. He walked away. I remained at the table. Merrick had always been organized with money. A storage unit? I had never heard of one. That afternoon, Dorian left for work. I went upstairs. His guest room was clean. On the desk sat a small brown notebook. I told myself I wouldn't open it. Then I saw my name on the first page. Inside was a list of dates. The first was 14 years earlier. The latest was 6 days before Merrick died. Besides, several dates were short notes. Transfer. Meeting. Signature. Beside the final date were 4 words. Amelia cannot know yet. I heard the front door open. Dorian stood in the hallway. He looked at the notebook, then at me. You shouldn't have touched that. I found it on your desk.
He took it from my hand.
Those aren't my records. Then whose are they? He didn't answer. I followed him downstairs. Where is the storage unit? Forget about it.
No.
He stopped at the door. Unit M17. Eastgate Storage. Why tell me now? His expression changed. Because if I don't, someone else will. The next morning, I drove to Eastgate Storage. The facility stood behind an old tire warehouse. Manager Vernon Pike checked my identification. Unit M17 is still active. My husband died 6 months ago. The payments haven't stopped. Who has access? Your husband, originally. Then one additional person was added.
Who?
Dorian Vale. My stomach tightened. I asked him to open the unit. Inside were boxes stacked almost to the ceiling. On top of one box lay a property deed. I picked it up. It was for my house. But the owner listed on the deed wasn't Merrick. It wasn't me. It was a company called Northbridge Residential Holdings. Under it was a bank statement. Large payments had been made from Northbridge to an account in Dorian's name. I took photographs. Then I heard footsteps. Dorian stood at the entrance. You came here. Why is my house owned by a company I've never heard of? He didn't answer. Why are they paying you? Those aren't what you think. Then explain them. He stepped inside. My father put the house into a private arrangement years ago. Without telling me? Yes. Why? Because he was trying to protect you. I laughed once. Everyone keeps saying that. Dorian looked toward the door. Then maybe you should ask what he was protecting you from.
His phone rang.
He checked it and went pale. Who is it? I asked. He rejected the call. A message appeared. He showed me the screen. It was a photograph of my house, taken from across the street that morning. Beneath it were 6 words. Tell Amelia to stop digging. I felt my mouth go dry. We're leaving, Dorian said.
No.
I'm calling the police. You can. Why wouldn't I? Because they'll see the forged document before they see the evidence. What forged document? He looked at me. The one with your signature. We drove to a cafe near the courthouse. Dorian opened his laptop.
There was a scanned contract.
My name appeared at the bottom. The signature looked exactly like mine. Except I had never seen the document. I didn't sign this. I know.
How?
I watched my father destroy the original. My heart stopped. You were there? 6 days before he died. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was looking for the original. I stared at him. You weren't trying to take the house.
No.
Then what were you looking for? The document that proves you were framed. Before I could respond, a woman stopped beside our table. She was in her early 40s, with short copper hair and a gray coat. Dorian looked up. Saskia. His sister had not spoken to me in 11 years. She placed a folder on the table. Amelia, my brother has been lying to you. Dorian stood. Saskia, don't. She ignored him. He's been looking for the wrong thing. I opened the folder. Inside was a copy of Marek's medical record. At the bottom was a name I had never seen before. Not Calder Rusk. Not Dorian. Not Marek. Saskia looked directly at me. Someone requested your husband's complete medical file 6 weeks before he died. My fingers tightened around the page. Who? She took a breath. The person who knew exactly when your husband was going to die. I stared at the name. Then I realized something that made the property deed suddenly seem less important. Someone had not waited for Marek to die before planning what would happen to me. They had started preparing for his death while he was still alive. The name on the medical request was Lenora Venn, and I had never heard it before. Saskia watched me read the page. Dorian stood beside the table, his jaw tight. Who is Lenora? I asked. Saskia answered. She was Calder Rusk's accountant. That's impossible, Dorian said. Why? Lenora died 3 months before Dad. I looked back at the document. The request had been made 6 weeks before Marek died. The signature was Lenora's. But if she was already dead, someone had used her identity. I closed the folder. Then who requested my husband's records? Saskia looked at Dorian. That is what my brother has been trying to find out. I turned toward him. You knew about this? I knew someone accessed Dad's records.
I didn't know whose name they used.
You knew and said nothing. I was trying to protect the investigation. You were living in my house. And someone was watching the house. For 6 months, I had thought Dorian was hiding something from me because he wanted the property. Now I wasn't sure which frightened me more, that I had been wrong, or that he had known enough to be afraid. Tell me everything, I said. He shook his head. Not here. We drove to a small legal office near the courthouse. Saskia had arranged for an attorney named Inez Hallberg to meet us. She placed the medical request under a magnifying lamp. This was submitted electronically, she said. Can you identify the device? Not from this copy. Inez looked at me. Did your husband have a business partner named Calder Rusk? Yes. Was he still involved in Marek's business when you married?
No.
Marek told me they separated years ago. Inez exchanged a look with Saskia. Saskia opened another folder. Dad lied. I stared at her. About what? Calder never completely left. She showed me corporate records. Northbridge Residential Holdings had been created 14 years earlier. Its registered manager was Calder Rusk. A second name appeared on several filings. Marek Nowak. Because Calder used my father's signature, Dorian said. I looked at him. You said my signature was forged. It was. Was my husband's too? Yes. This wasn't a disagreement over an inheritance. Someone had been building a false financial history around my family for years. Inez gathered the documents. We need originals. Where? Bank archives, corporate filings, medical access logs, anything that establishes who had control of the accounts. Dorian said, the original ledger is in a safe deposit box. Whose? Calder's. Inez looked up. Then how do you know? My father told me. When? The night before he died. What exactly did he say? Dorian hesitated. He told me not to trust anyone who claimed the house belonged to Northbridge. Did he mention me? Yes.
Dorian looked at me.
He said, if Amelia finds out, she'll blame herself. By 7 that evening, Saskia had left. Inez had gone to request the hospital records. Dorian stayed in the guest room. I sat alone in Marek's study. His desk was exactly as I had left it after the funeral. I searched until I found a small envelope. My name was written on it in Marek's handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a key. There was no explanation, only a number. I remembered the storage unit. I called Dorian downstairs. He saw the key. You found it. You knew about this?
No.
Then why did you look frightened? Because Dad gave me a key like that once. It's numbered 17. Dorian went silent. Then someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks. We both froze. Another 3. Dorian moved toward the window. Don't turn on the lights. Who is it? I don't know. He looked through the curtain. There's a black sedan. The knocking stopped. A few seconds later, an envelope appeared beneath the door. Dorian picked it up with a tissue. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Marek leaving the medical center 2 weeks before he died. On the back, someone had written, your husband knew what was coming. I stared at the photograph. Then I noticed the person standing behind Marek. A woman. I recognized her. She had attended Marek's funeral. She had hugged me. She had told me how sorry she was. Her name was Lenora Venn. But the photograph had been taken after the date of her supposed death. I looked at Dorian. Your accountant is alive. He shook his head.
No.
Then I saw 4 words beneath the photograph. Ask Saskia what she did. The next morning, I drove to Saskia's apartment. She opened the door, saw the photograph in my hand, and immediately stepped backward. Where did you get that? Someone left it at my house. She stared at Lenora's face. Then she whispered, he found her. Who? Saskia closed the door behind me. Calder. You said Calder disappeared.
He did.
Then how could he find Lenora? He never lost her. For 14 years, I've been trying to keep my brother alive. What does that have to do with Lenora? Everything. She finally told me the part she had kept hidden. 14 years earlier, Dorian had been involved in an accident that injured a woman. Marek had been driving. Dorian had been in the passenger seat. Calder discovered the truth and used it to control Marek. But Lenora had witnessed something else. She had seen Calder falsify the first property transfer connected to Northbridge. I placed the photograph on her table. Then tell me what you did. Saskia covered her face. I gave Calder information about Dorian. My stomach dropped.
Why?
To make him stop threatening my brother. You helped him. I thought I could control him. And could you?
No.
She looked at me. I made one terrible decision 14 years ago. What decision? I forged a document. I stared at her. For whom? Marek. What did it say? That Dorian wasn't responsible for the accident. You forged a legal document to protect him? Yes. And Calder found it? Yes. Saskia's voice broke. He used that forgery as the model for every fake signature that came after it. The room went silent. I suddenly understood why Dorian had warned me. Why Marek had hidden the storage unit. Why someone wanted me to stop looking. The fraud had not started after Marek died. It had started with one desperate lie 14 years earlier. And Saskia had just admitted she was the person who wrote the first false document. But before I could ask her why she had never confessed, her phone rang. She looked at the screen. The caller ID was blank. She answered. No one spoke. Then a man's voice said, "You should have left Amelia alone." Saskia went pale. The call ended. A second later, my phone received a message from an unknown number. It contained only an address. I recognized it immediately. It was the address of the house I had shared with Merrick. Underneath it were 5 words. "Come home before Dorian does." I looked at Saskia. Why would they tell me that? She stood abruptly. Because they want you to believe your stepson is the danger. And if he isn't? Saskia looked toward the window. Then whoever sent that message is already inside your house. I drove home with Saskia beside me, and neither of us spoke for the first 10 minutes. The message on my phone remained open. "Come home before Dorian does." Saskia kept looking at the screen. "Whoever sent this knows where you live," she said. "They sent it to scare me." "Yes." "Then why tell me someone is already inside?" "Because they want you to think Dorian is involved." I tightened my hands around the steering wheel. "That is exactly what you've been telling me." "I know. You also told me you forged a document that helped create this entire mess." "I did. So forgive me if I don't know who to trust." She nodded. "You shouldn't trust me blindly." That answer surprised me. "Then why are you coming with me?" "Because if someone is inside your house, I don't want you walking in alone." We reached my street just after 4 in the afternoon. My house looked normal. The curtains were open. The front porch was empty. There was no broken window, no damaged lock, nothing that suggested anyone had entered. But when I opened the front door, I knew immediately that something had changed. The house smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. Merrick had never smoked. Neither did Dorian. Saskia stopped behind me. "Did you leave a window open?"
No.
We walked through the hallway. Nothing was missing. The television was still in place. My laptop was on the dining table. Mark's books remained on the shelves. Then I saw the study door. It was open. I had closed it before leaving. Saskia whispered, "Don't touch anything." We entered. The desk drawers were open. Mark's old files had been removed from their folders and placed in neat piles. Someone hadn't been searching randomly. They had been looking for something specific. I checked the hidden compartment beneath the desk. Empty. "The key," I said. "What key?" "The one I found yesterday." I reached into my coat pocket. It was gone. My stomach tightened. "I had it this morning."
Saskia looked at me.
Then someone took it. A floorboard creaked upstairs. We both froze. I grabbed my phone. "Call the police." Before I could dial, footsteps moved across the ceiling. Then the guest room door slammed. Saskia pulled me toward the hallway. We went upstairs slowly. The guest room was empty. The window was open. On Dorian's desk sat the brown notebook. It had been opened to a different page. A sentence had been written beneath Marek's handwriting. "You were warned." I stared at it. Saskia whispered, "We need to leave." Then a noise came from downstairs. The front door opened. "Amelia?" It was Dorian. I almost shouted his name. He came up the stairs and stopped when he saw us. "What happened?" "You tell me," I said. His eyes moved to the notebook, then to the open window. "Where is the key?" "What key?" "The one Dad left you." "You knew about it?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't know where it was." "It was in my pocket this morning." Dorian's face hardened. "Someone took it." "You're very sure?" "Because whoever took it wants something from the storage unit." Saskia stepped forward. "You said you didn't know about the key." I said I didn't know where it was. She shook her head. "You always do that." Dorian looked at her. "You're still lying to her." "So are you." I stepped between them. "Enough." They stopped. "Both of you have been hiding things from me. I'm done being the last person to know what is happening in my own life."
Dorian looked at me.
"Then listen carefully." He took a small envelope from inside his jacket. "This is why I stayed." He handed it to me. Inside was a photograph of Merrick and a man I had never seen before. On the back was a date. 14 years earlier. Dorian pointed to the man. "That's Orrin Bell." "Who is he?" "A private investigator." Saskia answered. "He was hired by Calder." Dorian shook his head.
"No."
"That's what everyone thought." He took out another photograph. This one showed Oren standing beside Merrick. They weren't enemies. I looked between the photographs. They were working together. Dorian nodded. My father hired Oren to investigate Calder. Then why hide it? Because Oren disappeared. When? 2 days after he gave Dad the first evidence. Saskia folded her arms. And what evidence was that? Dorian looked at her. Northbridge was never Calder's company. Silence filled the room. What do you mean? I asked. Dorian opened his laptop. He showed me a corporate registration. Northbridge had been incorporated under a temporary trustee. The trustee's name was Oren Bell. Calder had become the public manager later. So Calder stole the company.
No, Dorian said.
He was invited in. By whom? Dorian hesitated. My father. I felt as if the floor had shifted. Merrick created Northbridge? Not exactly. What does that mean? He created it to buy the properties Calder was going after. Dad intended to protect the homeowners. I stared at the screen. Then why did Northbridge become a fraud operation? Because Dad lost control of it. To Calder?
No.
Dorian looked at Saskia. To someone else. Saskia's expression changed.
Dorian.
You know who? She looked away. I stepped closer. Who? She said nothing. Dorian answered for her. Milo Wren. I recognized the name. Marek's former assistant? Yes. I remembered Milo at the funeral. The flowers. The calls. The Friday visits. He had always seemed helpful. Dorian continued. Milo handled Dad's accounts. He had access to his medical schedule, business records, passwords, and private correspondence. And Lenora? Milo used her identity after she died. My hands became cold. Why? To access records without raising suspicion. I looked at the photograph again. Then the woman in this picture was Lenora. After her death. Dorian nodded. So someone used an old photograph to make us think she was alive. Exactly. I sat on the edge of the bed. For months, I had suspected Dorian. Now I was beginning to wonder if he had been trying to keep me alive long enough to expose someone else. But one question remained. If Milo is behind this, why is he still free? Dorian answered quietly. Because we don't have enough evidence. I looked at the open study downstairs. Then let's find it. Dorian stared at me. You're serious? Yes. Saskia shook her head. Emilia, this isn't a family argument anymore. I know. This man has been manipulating people for years. I know. He could hurt you. I looked at her. He already did. That evening, we drove to the Eastgate storage facility again. The manager, Vernon Pike, recognized us. You came back. I need access to M17, I said. He checked his computer. There's a problem. What problem? Your husband's unit was accessed yesterday. By whom? He pulled up the access log. The entry was recorded at 11:42 a.m. The person had used Dorian's access code. Dorian stared at the screen. I was at work. Vernon nodded. I have security footage. We watched the recording. A man entered wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap. His face was partly covered. He carried a black case. The image was grainy. Then he turned toward the camera. I recognized him. My breath caught. That's Milo.
Dorian looked at me.
You're sure? I've known him for years. Saskia stepped closer to the screen. Pause it. Vernon stopped the video. Saskia pointed at Milo's left hand. He's wearing a ring. What about it? That's not Milo's ring. Dorian frowned.
Whose is it? Saskia looked at me.
Marek's. I felt dizzy. My husband was buried wearing his wedding ring. Saskia shook her head. No. She zoomed in on the image. It isn't his wedding ring. I looked closer. The ring had a small black stone. Marek's wedding ring was plain gold. Then Dorian whispered, That's Oren Bell's ring. Everyone went silent. That's impossible, I said. Dorian looked at the screen. Oren disappeared 14 years ago. And yet someone wearing his ring just entered my husband's storage unit. Vernon looked uncomfortable. There is something else. He opened another access record. Someone entered M17 this morning.
Who?
The code belonged to Merrick. My heart stopped. Merrick is dead. I know. Then how did someone use his code? Vernon turned the monitor toward us. The access time was 9:16 a.m. Under the name was a note. Authorized by owner. Dorian's face went pale. That's not possible. I stared at the screen. Then my phone vibrated. A new message had arrived. There was no text. Only a photograph. It showed the inside of my house. The picture had been taken from the hallway. In the background was my study. And standing beside Marek's desk was a man. He was facing away from the camera. But I recognized the gray jacket. I had seen it that afternoon. It belonged to Milo. I looked at Dorian. He was inside my house. Dorian shook his head. Not today. Why? Because Milo is at the courthouse. I turned toward him. How do you know? He didn't answer.
Saskia did.
Because I called him an hour ago. I stared at her. You called Milo? She nodded slowly. He knew where we were. Then the storage unit lights suddenly went out. We heard the metal door slide down outside. Someone had locked us inside. And from the darkness came the sound of a phone ringing.
Not mine.
Not Dorian's. Not Saskia's. It was coming from one of the boxes behind us. Dorian switched on his flashlight. The ringing stopped. He opened the box. Inside was an old mobile phone. The screen showed one incoming call. The name displayed was Merrick Nowak. The phone on top of the box was still vibrating when Dorian picked it up. The screen showed my husband's name, Merrick Nowak. For several seconds, none of us moved. Merrick had been dead for 6 months.
Don't answer it, Dorian said. Why?
Because whoever set this up wants us to. The phone stopped. Then it rang again. I reached for it. Dorian caught my wrist. Amelia. If that's a recording, I need to hear it. He let go. I answered. Hello. Static filled the line. Then a man's altered voice whispered, You should have left the house. The call ended. Saskia stepped back. That isn't Merrick. I know. Dorian stared at the phone. My father used voice-changing software when he worked with Oren. Who is Oren? I asked. His private investigator. Before I could ask more, the storage lights went out. We heard the metal door slide shut. Someone had locked us inside. Dorian rushed to the entrance. Vernon, the manager's voice came through the intercom. I can't open it. The electronic system has been overridden. Call the police. I already did. Then something crashed behind us. A shelf had shifted. Dorian pulled it forward and exposed a narrow steel cabinet built into the wall. I remembered the key stolen from my house. The key, I whispered. Dorian looked at the cabinet. That's what they were searching for. I knelt beside the lock. Then I remembered something. The key was gone. Saskia searched her coat. I don't have it. Dorian checked his pockets. Neither do I. A second later, something metallic dropped from the bottom shelf. It was the key. Someone had placed it there. Dorian opened the cabinet. Inside were 3 folders and a digital recorder. The first folder contained property records. The second contained bank statements. The third had Marek's name written across it. I opened it. The first page was dated 12 days before his death. Amelia, I read. The letter said Merrick had discovered someone was preparing to transfer our house after his death. He didn't know exactly who was behind it, but he suspected someone close to him. Then I reached one sentence that made my hands shake. Do not trust anyone who asks you to sell. Dorian stared at the page. I didn't know about this. I continued reading. Merrick wrote that Northbridge had originally been created to protect homeowners from predatory property deals. Someone had later taken control of its accounts and begun using fake identities and forged signatures. Then came the final paragraph. If I die before I can expose him, find the ledger. Oren hid the original where only someone who knew our first investigation would look. Dorian whispered, The first investigation. Saskia looked at him. Where? Old Bell Foundry. We were released 20 minutes later. Detective Alina Sorov met us outside the storage facility. She was direct, calm, and clearly unimpressed by the strange details surrounding our case. I handed her the phone. Someone used my husband's name to call us. She examined it. Where did you find it? In the storage unit. Dorian showed her the security footage of the man entering M17. When she saw the ring on his hand, her expression changed. That belonged to Orrin Bell. You knew him? I asked. He was my first major investigation. She explained that Orrin disappeared 14 years earlier after telling someone he had evidence against Calder Rusk. Was he ever found?
No.
Then why would someone have his ring? That is what concerns me. Sorov looked at me. Has anyone asked you to sign anything since Merrick died? Yes. Milo Wren. What did he want? A transfer of my rights in the house. Did you sign?
No. Good.
If he contacts you, call me. We went home. On the kitchen counter sat a white envelope. There was no stamp and no name. Inside was a photocopy of my marriage certificate. My signature was circled. Underneath, someone had written, "You signed before. You just don't remember." I called Dorian. He arrived with Saskia. Inez Hallberg came shortly afterward and examined the paper. This isn't your original marriage certificate. How do you know? The registration number is wrong. She pointed to my signature. This was copied from another document. I stared at it, but it looks exactly like mine. That's the purpose of a forged signature. She turned the page over. There is a date here. 3 days after Marek's death. Dorian went pale. Someone was still using Dad's records. Or pretending to, I said. Then Dorian looked at me. There is something else. What? My father left a second will. I froze. You told me there was only one. I didn't know about the second one until yesterday. Where is it? With Orrin. Saskia shook her head. Orrin disappeared 14 years ago. I know. Then how can he have Marek's will? Because Dad wrote it 14 years ago. Inez stood. If that will exists, the property arrangement may be completely different from what we thought. What does it say? I asked. I don't know. Then we find it. The next morning, Detective Sorov called. She had traced the mysterious phone. It had been activated remotely from a location near the old Bell foundry. We went there with 2 officers. The building had been abandoned for years. Dust covered the machinery, and broken windows let cold air through the upper floors. Dorian led us to a narrow corridor. My father and Orrin used to meet here. He stopped beside an old furnace. Behind it was a metal panel. Detective Sorov opened it. There was no ledger, only a cassette tape and a photograph. The photograph showed Merrick, Orrin, Calder, and another man. I stared at the 4th face. I know him.
Dorian looked at me. Who?
Milo's father. Saskia went pale. He died before Milo started working for Dad. I turned the photograph over. A date was written on the back. 14 years earlier. Under it were 7 words. 4 men entered the room. 3 left. Nobody spoke. Sorov took the photograph. What happened here? Dorian looked at it. I don't know. Then he noticed something. The photograph showed the men standing beside a furnace. Behind them was a brick wall. There. He pointed to a small marking. My father used that symbol when he hid evidence. Sorov searched the wall. Behind a loose brick was a key. Dorian took it. The ledger isn't here. Then where? I asked. He looked at the key. My mother's old house. Saskia stared at him. That property was sold. The property was sold, he said. The house wasn't. We drove there immediately. The house had been empty for years. In the basement, Dorian found a loose brick behind an old storage shelf. A metal box was hidden inside. The original ledger was there. I opened it. The pages contained transfers, account numbers, and names connected to Northbridge. Then I found an envelope. It was addressed to me. Marek's handwriting covered the front. My hands trembled as I opened it. Emilia, if you're reading this, the person who betrayed me is not Calder. I looked at Dorian. Then I read the next line. Calder was only following orders. My heart began pounding. The final sentence was short. The man who ordered everything is someone you have trusted since the day I died. A floorboard creaked upstairs. Dorian looked toward the doorway. Saskia whispered, "We're not alone." Someone stepped into view. It was Milo Ren. He held a gun, and he was looking directly at me. Milo Ren stood at the basement door with a gun pointed toward the floor. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't trembling. That frightened me more than if he had been angry. For years, Milo had been the man who brought flowers when someone was sick, arranged meals after funerals, and remembered birthdays. He had been my husband's trusted assistant for nearly a decade. Now he looked at the ledger in my hands. "You found it," he said. Dorian stepped in front of me. "Put the gun down." Milo smiled. "You always were your father's favorite mistake." Saskia moved closer to the stairs. "Milo, this is over."
"No," he said.
"It ends when I decide it ends." I held the ledger against my chest. "You ordered everything?" His eyes moved to me. "You finally understand. Did you forge my signature?" "Yes." "Did you access Marek's medical records?" "Yes." "Did you use Lenora's identity?" "Yes." Each answer came without hesitation. I felt anger replacing my fear. "Did you kill my husband?" Milo's expression changed.
"No."
Dorian stared at him. "Then what did you do?" I made sure he couldn't stop me. "That isn't an answer." "It is the only answer you're getting." Milo pointed the gun toward Dorian. "Move." Dorian didn't move. Milo took one step forward. Then Detective Sorov's voice came from the top of the stairs. "Drop the weapon." Milo froze. Two officers stood behind her. For the first time, his confidence disappeared.
He looked at me.
"You brought the police. You brought a gun." Sorov stepped down. "Put it on the floor." Milo slowly lowered the weapon. Then he kicked it away. The officers arrested him. But before they took him upstairs, he turned toward me. "You think this ledger will save you?" I said nothing. He smiled. "You haven't read the last page." After Milo was taken away, I opened the ledger again. The final pages had been removed. I looked at Dorian. He knew. Dorian nodded. "Someone took the pages before we arrived." Saskia sat on the basement steps. Then Milo wasn't working alone. Detective Sorov returned. "He won't tell us who helped him." I looked at her. "He said I haven't read the last page." Sorov's expression tightened. "Then we need to find it." The officers searched the house for another hour. Nothing. We returned to my house after midnight. I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m, I went into Marek's study. I opened the drawer where I had kept his personal papers. There was a photograph I had never noticed. Marek was standing outside the courthouse. Beside him was Oren Bell. On the back was a handwritten note. "The first account is not in a bank." I remembered the ledger. Then I remembered something Dorian had said. My father created Northbridge to protect homeowners. I searched the company records again. The first property Northbridge ever purchased was not a house. It was a small community center. The building had been demolished years earlier, but its original address was still on the paperwork. I called Dorian. "We need to go somewhere." "Where?" "The first Northbridge property." We drove there just before sunrise. The community center was gone. A grocery store stood in its place. But the old municipal records showed something interesting. The land had once contained a basement archive. It had never been removed. We found the entrance behind the store's loading area. Inside were rusted shelves and boxes covered in dust. Saskia found a metal cabinet. Inside was a bundle of documents. The first Northbridge account, the original agreements, and a handwritten list of 12 names. The names were homeowners whose properties Calder had attempted to acquire. At the bottom was another name, Marek Nowak. Dorian stared at it. Why was Dad on the list? Saskia took the document. He wasn't a victim.
What?
He was listed as a target. I looked at the date. 14 years earlier. Marek had apparently been trying to stop Calder from taking control of the properties. But someone had been tracking him. Inez arrived shortly afterward. She examined the records. This changes the entire case.
How?
Northbridge was established as a protective trust. If the original agreement is valid, Calder never had legal authority to transfer these properties. What about my house? Your house may never have been legally transferred either. I felt a wave of relief. Then Inez looked at the final document. There's a problem. What? The trust was controlled by 3 trustees. Who? Merrick Nowak. Orrin Bell. And the third. She pointed to the signature. I recognized it. My own. I stared at the page. That isn't possible. Inez examined it. This signature is genuine. My heart stopped. I never signed that. You may have.
No.
Dorian stepped closer. When was it dated? Inez looked at the corner. 14 years ago. I couldn't remember signing anything connected to Northbridge. Then something came back to me. The first year Merrick and I were married, he had asked me to sign several business documents. He told me they were insurance papers. I had signed them without reading every page. My stomach turned. What if I signed it?
Dorian looked at me.
Then you were one of the trustees. And that means what? It means you may have had legal authority over every property Northbridge owned. Inez nodded. But someone later removed your authority.
How?
By forging a resignation. She found the document. My signature appeared at the bottom. But this time, it wasn't mine. I could tell immediately. The pressure was wrong. The letters were too careful. Someone had copied my name. Saskia whispered. Milo. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. Milo couldn't have done all of this alone. Inez agreed. He needed access to old records. Dorian looked at the list of names. My father trusted someone with the archive. Who? He didn't answer. I remembered Milo's words. Calder was only following orders. The man who ordered everything is someone you have trusted since the day I died. But Milo had said something else. You haven't read the last page. I looked at Dorian. What if he wasn't talking about the ledger? Dorian frowned. What else could have a last page? My mind went back to Marek's letters. The hidden office. The second will. The medical file. The storage unit. Then I remembered the brown notebook. I had only read the first few pages. Dorian had taken it from me before I could continue. We returned home. The notebook was still in the guest room. I opened it. Page after page contained dates and names. Some belonged to Northbridge. Some belonged to people I didn't recognize. Then I reached the final section. There were only 3 pages. The first was dated 6 days before Merrick died. The second was dated 2 days before. The third was dated the day he died. The final page contained 1 sentence. I know who has been helping Milo. Below it was a name. I read it twice. My hands began shaking. I knew that person. I had trusted that person. And that person had been standing beside me from the beginning of this nightmare. Dorian saw my face. Who? I couldn't answer. Saskia took the notebook. She read the name. Then she whispered. No. Dorian grabbed it. His expression collapsed. No. She wouldn't. I looked at both of them. Who is she? Saskia slowly raised her eyes. Marek's cardiologist. I stared at her. The doctor? She nodded. Dr. Celia Voss. I remembered her perfectly. She had called me personally after Marek's death. She had told me his condition had been unpredictable. She had comforted me. She had even attended the funeral. Then I remembered the photograph of Merrick leaving the medical center. Lenora had been behind him, but someone else had been standing near the entrance. A woman in a white coat. I had never noticed her. Now I did. Dorian's phone rang. He answered. It was Detective Sorov. Milo has disappeared. Dorian went silent.
What?
He was being transported for questioning. The vehicle was intercepted.
How?
We don't know. I looked at the notebook. Sorov continued. One of the officers assisting the transport has also disappeared. My blood went cold. Detective, I said, taking the phone. Where is Milo now? We're trying to find him. Then search for Dr. Voss. There was silence. Why? Because I think she knows where he is. Sorov asked. What makes you say that? I looked at the final page of Marek's notebook. Because my husband wrote her name down 2 days before he died. A few seconds later, Sorov said, Stay inside. The call ended. Then someone knocked on my front door. Dorian moved toward the window. Don't open it. A woman's voice came from outside. Amelia? I recognized it immediately. Dr. Celia Voss. She sounded calm, almost gentle. Please open the door. I looked at Dorian. He shook his head. Then Celia spoke again. I know you found Marek's notebook. My heart stopped. She continued. And I know exactly what you're going to find next. I didn't answer. Celia lowered her voice. Amelia, your husband didn't die because of his heart. I stepped closer to the door. Then why did he die? There was a long silence. Finally, she said, because he discovered who his real enemy was. Dorian whispered, don't open it. But Celia was already walking away. Before she reached the end of the porch, she turned. Ask Dorian where he was the night your husband died. Then she disappeared into the darkness. I turned toward Dorian. He was completely still. What does she mean? He didn't answer.
Dorian.
He closed his eyes. Then he said the words I had never expected to hear. I was with my father that night. I stared at him. And you never told me.
No.
What happened? Dorian looked at the floor. He asked me to leave the house before he died. Why? Because he knew someone was coming for him.
Who?
Dorian finally looked at me. I thought it was Calder. He swallowed. But now I think it was someone who knew exactly where I was. I stepped closer. Who? His voice was barely audible. Dr. Voss. Then his phone buzzed again. A message appeared. No number. No name. Only a photograph. It showed Marek lying in his hospital bed on the night he died. Standing beside him was Dorian. And behind Dorian stood Dr. Celia Voss. The timestamp was 6 minutes before Marek's final heartbeat. The photograph on Dorian's phone changed everything. Marek was lying in his hospital bed. Dorian stood beside him. Dr. Celia Voss stood behind Dorian. The timestamp was 6 minutes before my husband died. I looked at Dorian. You were there. Yes. You told me you left before he died. I thought I did. That isn't an answer. He lowered his eyes. I left the room. I went into the hallway. And Dr. Voss stayed? Yes. Why? I don't know. I stared at the photograph. For 6 months, I had believed Marek died because his heart failed. Now I was looking at evidence that someone had been beside his bed moments before his death. I called Detective Sorov. She arrived 20 minutes later. When she saw the photograph, she immediately requested the hospital security records. While we waited, Dorian finally told me what had happened that night. Marek called me around 11, he said. He sounded frightened. What did he say? He told me to come to the hospital. Why? He said someone had entered the house. My heart tightened. Someone had entered our house. He believed they were looking for the ledger. Did you find anyone?
No.
Dorian continued. When I reached the hospital, Dad was awake. He told me he had discovered who controlled Northbridge.
Who?
He didn't say. Why not? Because Dr. Voss entered the room. I looked at the photograph again. What happened then? She told me to leave. And you did? Yes. Why would you listen to her? Because she was his doctor. I shook my head. You were 32 years old. Your father was terrified. Why did you leave? Dorian's face tightened. Because she told me you were in danger. I stared at him. She said someone was watching the house. She said if I stayed at the hospital, you might be alone. So, you left to protect me? Yes. And what happened after you left? I drove home. But you weren't there.
No.
Where were you? He hesitated. At the storage facility. I felt a cold sensation move through me. The night Marek died? Yes. Why? To retrieve the ledger. You left your dying father to get a document. I thought I was saving you. I looked away. For months, I had hated Dorian for staying in my house. Now I understood that he had spent the night my husband died chasing evidence. But one question remained. Did you see Dr. Voss again?
No.
Detective Sorov returned with the hospital records. There's something strange. She placed the security log on the table. Dr. Voss entered Marek's room at 11:38 p.m. That matches the photograph, I said. She left at 12:07. When did Merrick die? 12:13.
I stared at the times.
6 minutes. Sourav nodded. Exactly. Who entered the room after her? No one. Then how do we know what happened? Sourav turned another page. We don't. Inez arrived with a forensic medical consultant. Dr. Calder examined Marek's original records. He spent nearly an hour comparing medication charts, blood tests, and nursing notes. Finally, he looked at me. There are irregularities. What kind? Marek's medication dosage was changed. By whom? The electronic record says Dr. Voss. Was it dangerous? Not necessarily. But given his condition, the combination could have increased his cardiac risk. My hands went numb. Are you saying she killed him?
No.
I'm saying the medication change requires investigation. Inez looked at Sourav. We need the pharmacy records. Sourav nodded. The pharmacy records showed that the medication had been collected 2 days before Merrick died. The person who picked it up wasn't Dr. Voss. It was Milo. I felt sick. Milo worked with her. Sourav shook her head. Possibly. Then Dorian spoke.
No.
Everyone looked at him. Milo picked up medication for my father all the time. That doesn't clear him, Sourav said. I know.
Dorian looked at me.
But there's something else. He pulled out his phone. I recorded the conversation I had with Dad that night. I stared at him. You recorded your dying father? I didn't know it would be the last conversation. He played the file. Marek's voice came through the speaker.
Weak.
Breathless. But clear. Dorian, listen to me. Do not trust the person who tells you Amelia is in danger. Dorian's voice answered. Who is it? Merrick coughed. I don't have time. Dad, tell me. The house isn't the target. A pause. You are. The recording ended. I looked at Dorian. Why didn't you tell me about this? I was afraid. Of what? That you would think Dad was talking about you. I closed my eyes. Merrick had known someone was targeting me, but he had also known Dorian might be used against me. The next morning, Detective Sourav found Dr. Voss. She was at the private clinic where she worked. She agreed to speak with investigators. She denied everything. I adjusted Marek's medication because his condition had deteriorated. Why didn't you document the reason? I did. The record says otherwise. She looked at me. Grief makes people search for someone to blame. I stood. You were beside my husband 6 minutes before he died. I was his doctor. You used a dead woman's identity. Her expression changed. For the first time I saw fear. Where did you hear that? Marek's records. She looked at Sourav. I want an attorney. Sourav ended the interview. But as we left, Dr. Voss called after me. Amelia. I stopped. She lowered her voice. You don't understand what your husband was involved in. I know enough.
No.
She looked directly at me. Merrick wasn't trying to expose Northbridge. Then what was he doing? He was trying to destroy it. I froze. She continued. He created it. He lost control of it. Then he realized what it had become. Why would he hide that from me? Because you are one of the people who could legally stop him. I thought about the document with my genuine signature. The trustee agreement. 14 years earlier, Merrick had asked me to sign something he called an insurance document. I had forgotten it, but my signature had been real. Dr. Voss continued. Your husband planned to transfer Northbridge's remaining assets into a public trust. And you stopped him?
No.
Then who did? She looked toward Dorian. Ask his son. I turned. Dorian looked as shocked as I was. Sourav stepped between us. That's enough. Dr. Voss was taken back inside. That evening, Dorian and I sat in my kitchen. For the first time since Merrick died, there was no anger between us. Only exhaustion. Did you know about the trust? I asked.
No.
Did your father ever tell you he wanted to destroy Northbridge?
No.
Then why did Dr. Voss say to ask you? I don't know. I looked at the brown notebook. Then I noticed something. The handwriting on the last page was different. I compared it with Marek's letters. The final sentence had not been written by him. Inez confirmed it. Someone added this later. I stared at the words. I know who has been helping Milo. The sentence was a trap. Someone wanted us to suspect Dr. Voss.
But why?
Then Saskia called. Her voice was shaking. Amelia, I found something. What? I went through Dad's old email archive. And there was a message sent the morning he died. From whom? Merrick. That doesn't make sense. I know. What did it say? Saskia hesitated. It was addressed to Dorian. My stomach tightened. Read it.
She did.
Your father wrote, if I don't make it through tonight, tell Amelia the truth about the accident. Tell her you were not responsible. I looked at Dorian. He went pale. That's not all, Saskia said. What else? The email was sent from inside the hospital. Dorian stood. That can't be. There's more. She took a breath. The account was accessed 6 minutes after Merrick died. I felt the room go silent. Who accessed it? Saskia answered. Your husband's account was accessed using Dorian's password. I looked at him. You didn't do it.
No.
Then someone knew your password. Dorian's face changed. He whispered, there was only one person who knew it.
Who?
My father. That doesn't help.
No.
He looked at me. Dad didn't give his password to anyone. Then I remembered something. Marek's birthday. His first wife's birthday. Our wedding anniversary. None of them were Dorian's password. I asked him what it was. He hesitated. It's the name of the woman from the accident. I stared at him. The woman who was injured? Yes. What was her name? Mara Ellison. I felt a chill. Someone had accessed Marek's account using the name of the woman connected to the secret that had haunted Dorian for 14 years. Then my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered. A woman's voice said, Amelia, my name is Mara Ellison. I couldn't speak. I've been waiting 14 years to talk to you. I looked at Dorian. He had heard her voice. Mara continued. Your husband told me the truth about the accident. Dorian stood. What did he tell you? He told me he was driving. Dorian's face went white. But that's not why I called. What do you want? I asked. I need you to understand something. What? Merrick wasn't protecting Dorian that night. She paused. He was protecting me. My breath caught. From whom? Mara answered. From the same person who has been controlling your family for 14 years. The call ended.
Dorian looked at me.
Amelia, we need to find her. I nodded. But before we could move, another message arrived. This time, it contained an address. Mara's address. And beneath it was a warning. If you go there, Dorian will finally learn who is driving the car. I looked at him. He stared back at me. For 14 years, Dorian had believed his father's secret was about protecting him. Now we knew there was another version of that night. And for the first time, I understood why Merrick had spent so many years hiding the truth. The accident had never been the real secret. It was who had been sitting in the back seat.